All right. Yay, we are good. Okay. Morning.
Good morning.
It was a good tour of Palmer Ridge this morning. Thank you guys could come. Today is Tuesday, October 1st. It's fall, y'all. It is 9 o'clock, and we are starting our work session. Ms. Wood, would you please do roll call?
Mr. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Norris.
Here.
Mr. Schwartz.
Here.
Dr. Shank.
Here.
Ms. Upchurch.
Here. And just to remind everybody, to view the live stream video of this meeting, please go to the Lewis Palmer School District 38 YouTube page, which is www.youtube.com, user LPSD community. And the Board of Education meetings are there on the webpage. And I also want to say Mr. Schwartz's absence is excused, and we are sorry for the circumstances that you couldn't be with us today, sir, but we're glad you're able to attend via telephone. Okay. Ms. Shank, would you like to do Pledge of Allegiance for us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to kick it off. I'm going to start us off very briefly with the Colorado Association of School Boards update. We have an upcoming fall conference and delegate assembly that will be held in Pueblo on October 18th and 19th. And as the board liaison to CASB and the Legislative Resolutions Committee member, board of directors with CASB, and the delegate for D38, I wanted to just briefly run down some things that are coming up. We had a board, state board meeting last weekend up in Denver, and we discussed policies. We went through first readings, second readings. Some of them we postponed for third readings. That we had did some redlining, and then some more redlining, and some more redlining. We just discussed some ballot initiatives. We have some upcoming legislators that will be on the ballot, so we'll see what happens with that. But if you look on your board docs, on the attachments, there is the CASB resolutions booklet. And the reason I wanted to point that out was, as I'm having a hard time getting on right now, there is only 9 resolutions this year. So the fall conference has breakout sessions on Friday, and then our delegate assembly starts on Saturday. Ms. Schenk, are you able to make it down to Pueblo to watch the delegate assembly in action? It'll be a short one, and we'll be done by noon. And there's only 9 resolutions. CASB's done something a little different this year. They've put together a platform. So, for example, when we push so hard for local control and unfunded mandates, fully funding of IDEA, which is Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, that is now in the platform for CASB. So the 9 resolutions were pretty short, and I am not, Ms. Wood, I'm having a hard time pulling it up. I was going to go through them with you all, since there's only 9 of them, to get your perspectives on how we want to vote. One of the ones
Tiffany?
Yes.
So if I remember correct, I had a question about this because the efficacy of getting these resolutions into law, I think, I want to validate this with you, the last couple of years have been really high, has it not?
Yes, CASB's had some, so CASB's taking some stronger positions on the request that was asked is, okay, if these resolutions are passed at the delegate assembly, then shouldn't we, as the Legislative Resolutions Committee, be actually putting those to action and taking a position on more bills, which we did. And there were some bills that some legislators came to CASB and said, why haven't you supported this? And we took a position of oppose. And we have an opportunity to take a position of amend, oppose, monitor, but we started taking more aggressive positions, and we really did see that effect some bills, not all bills. There were some bills that some of the caucuses were determined they were going to pass them regardless of what position anybody took on them. And I am having a really hard time pulling this up. I wanted to go through this. Are you guys having a difficulty pulling yours up? Are you able to pull up the resolutions book?
Yeah, I was.
I am.
But my question really was, didn't CASB have a tremendous success ratio of the things they sponsored that actually got passed into law in the last year and maybe the year before?
Yeah, so some of them, there's a bill monitoring page on CASB's site that shows where CASB took a position, and they take the position based off of feedback from other board members across the state of Colorado, and they take positions based on the board of directors. They are one of the stronger education lobbying groups. We've pushed very, very hard to eliminate the budget stabilization factor, but it also still resides on us locally on how we lean into bills. So we don't want to just be CASB dependent on when a bill comes about. We still have the freedom locally to decide on for ourselves. And since I can't pull up the booklet.
I think there's a problem on board docs.
Okay. So CASB took a position, the board of directors took a position. There it is. Thank you so much, Chris.
I just got into.
Okay.
You got it?
Yep. So we're going to go through these very quickly as I scroll through. Can we plug this into the overhead? Do you have it up?
Yes. Why don't you pull it up there, Vicki?
So what I wanted to get at, there's on the the resolutions book that you'll see CASB's platform, and that platform is, you'll see our own fingerprints in some of these platforms. So if you want to scroll, yeah, that's what I'm getting to, Amber, the same thing. So can you scroll to not the standing, keep going. Nope, that's the rules. Keep going. I'll tell you when to stop because I'm not sure exactly what page it's on. Okay, here we go. So, platform. Here's part of our platform and the planks. This is where the LRC, which is the Legislative Resolution Committee, rethought about what does it look like. Oh, you're gonna give it to me to play with? Okay, I'm gonna play. How do I scroll? Yeah. Perfect, thank you. So here you'll see our legislative agenda at a glance for the 2025 session, and you can see priorities for bill ideas is to fine-tune 1448, the school finance formula, ensure the BS factor is not reinstated, and to move forward on new accountability systems based on 1241. And they have a task force for that, and then to update Cora to provide more response turnaround. And so they're broken down into, you have finance, student success, increased total per pupil spending to get to the national average, fully fund Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act. That's when you all recall, you sent me to, I went to DC on my own dime and advocated at the national level for that one. Increase and ensure adequate and sustainable pre-K funding levels. I'm just going through this very quickly. Adopt this. This was a big one, Brett. We're pushing to adopt the School Finance Act no later than 21 days prior to sign day. We'll see if we've been pushing that for a while. So basically, when we have to vote on our budgets in June, the legislature gives us very little time to really dive into our budgets because they wait till the very last minute to adopt that, the School Finance Act. So pushing them to adopt it sooner so that we can adopt our budgets and really dive into them. Accountability system, mental health support, increase resources to make education spaces that are safe and successful learning environments, systemic, did we say that? And systemic, yeah. Oh, wait, that's a typo. Local governance, this is one that we had this came from us, guys. Reduce unfunded mandates placed on locally elected boards of education. Honor constitutionally mandated local control of Board of Educations, engage public at local, state, and federal levels, and ensure required response turnaround time for public requests for information for CORAs. So these three are from our resolutions that we put forth. And Mr. Redgway, thank you you've helped draft some of those. So thank you so much for that. So then I want to just jump down. These are our planks. And then bear with me. Thank you, Vicki, for the mouse. Okay. So I encourage you all to look through all this because really good information. These are our standing resolutions. And then we get to the first resolution submitted by St. Frayne. And that is CASB supports adopting the Accreditation and Accountability Task Force recommendations on opportunity advancement and equity in K-12 public education. And they have some rationale on it. But if there is any of these that we as a board say, you know what, Tiffany, we want you to vote yes, definitely, or vote no, or amend it, you have that as a board. I am only one voice. So you as a board, we all as a board have the opportunity, and the district has an opportunity to say, hey, here's how we feel about any of these. Please give feedback on these. Otherwise, it's just me voting. And you're trusting me to vote.
We trust you.
Oh, good. So this was one I wanted to bring up because Amber had asked about this last time, and this is why I had asked. And I don't think this sounds like it's not an issue here in D38. But some school districts are seeing folks move in from out of state, out of country, and our state graduation requirements are above and beyond what they've been able to accomplish in their own spaces and places from where they come from. So St. Vrain wants to ask that legislation be passed so that graduation, it's easier to get a GED without punishing the school district. Because if we don't have students that attain a GED, as I understand it, Ms. Wetstein, that counts against our graduation rate, or it has an effect on our graduation rate.
It doesn't benefit us.
It doesn't benefit us. So that's what St. Vrain was asking is don't let it count towards or against a school district.
It just doesn't count toward your graduation rate. So I think what they're asking is that it actually is calculated into graduation rate now.
Yeah.
I think that's okay.
Yes. So in case anybody didn't hear that, so they're asking that GEDs count towards the graduation rate. So this was one that was highly debated in the legislative group. It doesn't affect us one way or another. There's opportunity to visit it, but I wanted to get your professional opinion from the team on this one in particular, since we talk about it so much. And this was new to me. I was like, I have no idea. So I would love an input on this one.
While it does, and I'll just start, I would offer that while it doesn't necessarily, it isn't a significant population of students in our district here in Lewis Palmer, 38, I do agree that there are a number of students around the state that would benefit from getting their GED, and that is a certificate, a diploma of sort, in that way, and that it should count toward that graduation rate. I don't really know the history as to why it was excluded at one time when the accreditation system was created. I can't speak to that, but I can certainly understand the rationale, and I would be in support of it counting toward that graduation rate for a school district. I think it would benefit.
Okay. That's helpful. Any other thoughts or input? Just nods?
That makes sense to me.
I mean, my question would be, are there any arguments against it that anyone's made, just for perspective?
Nobody made any arguments against it, other than it seems complicated and what does it look like was the bigger question, because sometimes the devil is in the details. So the bigger question was, what does that look like, and is a GED as valuable? Do you do it before they graduate, GED after graduation, like you give a full year, or before or after? Nobody actually said things like, nope, we totally disagree with allowing GEDs to be counted towards graduation. It was more a, what unforeseen doors does this open? So on the surface, we as a legislative resolutions team did not forward it with a favorable recommendation because there was a lot of questions left to what does it look like.
If it changes, is it going to be retroactive? Like, is somebody going to have to jump through hoops for hours and hours to go fix
That
years?
was one of the questions. That was a concern that was brought up, is would that be retroactive? And that's a question that I can ask the presenter, the St. Vrain's delegate, when we're discussing it on the floor.
So, Dr. Dattery, is that juice worth the squeeze? I don't know what level of effort is required to go back and fix.
That I can't speak to either. I don't know if they would go back. I mean, then that would have significant implications on district performance frameworks, school performance frameworks at the high school. I mean, my inclination would be that is not what's the issue here. It's really about going forward. But I haven't spoken to folks that have brought this, potential resolution forward here.
So I like the idea. I think it would be beneficial, but maybe from our stance we can say let's not do any kind of retroactivity.
Okay.
And make it an end-up change.
Ron, did you have something to add?
I just want to make sure I'm wrapping my head around the impact of this. So in our particular case, as purely an example, because I know this is statewide, we graduate 550 or so kids out of the two operating high schools, another 100 kids or so out of Monument Academy Secondary, right?
That's a good, yes, estimate of number.
Give or take.
Correct.
So 650 roughly. In our particular case, purely as an example, how many individuals are we talking about that would fall into this scenario?
We don't have that data handy, but it is very minimal, if any, at this point.
Right, and so my question is, if it's less than 6.5, then it doesn't move the needle by 1%.
Correct.
Right.
In our district, it does not, Mr.
Right, and
Schwartz.
so now my question, that was for purposes of example. Now my question is, on a state basis, are we talking about moving the needle by more than 1%?
They don't have that. That's a good question to ask.
There has to be a reason we're doing it, right?
Right.
And in part because it doesn't, I can tell you just from my former experience, because it does not count toward a district's graduation rate, it is not always a viable option in which students are going through, even though there are students that do benefit from that option. So while it's an option for them, it actually will count against a district because it doesn't count toward their graduation rate. And so it's not as viable of an option that districts typically support. So I think St. Vrain, there's other districts of that size where students really could benefit from getting their GED, which it is an equivalency program, a high school equivalency to getting a high school diploma. And the idea being, even, us not probably having a lot of high stake in this, but that there are certainly districts where there are students who would benefit from this as an option and a pathway to getting their high school diploma that they otherwise are struggling.
And Ron, I can ask what that percentage is statewide.
So are you saying that if it counted, it might be supported more?
Correct.
Okay. then I'm absolutely in favor of supporting students getting their GED. I know of two who don't have two young adults that don't have a high school diploma, and I mean, not just for them, but they should.
Okay. All right. The next one I wanted to talk about very quickly is, I have my personal opinions of this one. This one is to increase required instructional hours, and this was also St. Vrain, that CASB supports increasing the state's required instructional hours to ensure that every student has access to comprehensive learning opportunities that prepare them for success. And there's rationale to it on what other states do. I have a very strong opinion on this, but I would be curious, without influencing my board, what your thoughts are. Just initially.
What's the rationale?
The rationale is that increasing those instructional hours gives students more opportunity to learn, and that most states have a minimum of 180 days, and more instructional time allows for deeper exploration of subjects, enhancing a student's understanding, retention of materials, and so they saw it as a benefit to students.
So I'm assuming that means that we have a lower standard.
In Colorado, correct.
160 days.
Right.
Colorado is 160.
60.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's actually on the
It
right
is.
there. Yep, 160.
right. I would very much be in favor of more time for that if ours is lower.
Anyone else?
How's the community as a whole going to feel for when we go down to the floor and say, sorry, you got to work more?
Our teachers that are underpaid?
Yeah. Is that a good reason, though, for having fewer? We don't pay you enough, so you don't have to teach as much. How about we pay them enough? And
So in Colorado, it's also not mandated that you only be 160. A school district can have local control and increase their days of instruction on their own if they want to.
oh, yeah.
So that was my perspective, was what local control. We can go to our community if we wanted to and say we want our kids to be in school 186 days of the school year. We don't have the dollars. Teachers might not. The amount of work we already have piled on top. But at the same time, if we wanted to, any school district could do that with local control.
Aren't we already at risk of missing our required hours some years just to do all the snow days?
Just minimum of 160.
I know
We build in sufficient buffer for snow days typically.
I swear 2 or
Unless
3 years
there's
ago
a-
we had to get an exception or something.
Every now and then, yeah. Yeah, and we usually do that in the form of, we try not to add, from what I've seen, my experience has been that the administration tries not to add days to the end of the school year. They try to find other ways, because those 160 days are also counted in hours, in contact hours. So, but if we wanted to, we could.
So for reference, we currently schedule in our calendar for the upcoming school year 160 days at elementary, 164 at middle school, and 166 at high school. Although we do have a longer school day, and so we can equate the hours into equivalent days. So we do have about 11 days cushion for elementary for snow days, 9 at middle, and 15 at high school to get to that 160 mark.
Patty, I can honor that voice and speak to the value of it, whilst also speaking to the value of local control.
No, once you make that clear, then if we think that more days are needed, then we can do that. But I don't think it's necessary to mandate something that people can do on their own.
Okay.
Don't like mandates.
I would tend to agree with that, actually. I mean,
Yeah.
since we have the ability to add the days if we need to, I'm sure it would actually benefit other districts a lot more than it would benefit us. More struggling districts, but they can do that right now if they want to.
I've often thought, so it's just as a philosophical idea, I was like, if you have a school district that is achieving well, maybe they could be rewarded with less days. Our superintendent adamantly shook her head no.
That's it like I did when I just go, no.
All right, so then we go to number 4, and these we'll speed through a lot quicker. We did forward this one with a favorable recommendation, and this is actually just local control of mental health.
Yes.
CASB urges the General Assembly to modify current level law on mental health residential facilities. What this one is there's a school district where the state of Colorado is wanting to put a mental health facility very close to a school. And so that school district doesn't have the local control to say, hey, can we work with our community and find the proper placement of this place versus right next to our school. So they're battling with the state right now on this. So because of the way the law is, it's the city of North Glen. Actually, the description of it is right there, the rationale statement. It describes the situation. So this is, we did a favorable recommendation because, again, each community in each school district is different and unique in their needs and their space. So that's why it was brought forward, and that's why we were like, sure, local control. Mm-hmm. Do you guys have any thoughts? Does anybody have any thoughts? All right, then we'll move along on this one. The next one, and I think, see, we can go faster now. If you notice, Adams 12, by the way, and St. Vrain had a lot of resolutions this year. The mill levy override equity. Mr. Ridgway, I would love to know your thoughts on this one.
So I was appointed to the mill levy override working group, legislative working group, and we had our first meeting of that last week. Adams 12 is really emotional about this to an inappropriate level. And so they, as part of the new School Finance Act 1448 last year, pushed through an alternative formula for mill levy override match that was significantly different from the formula that I was involved in and passed with Case and lots of other support back in 22. And so the working group really, I think, will take this and be able to recalibrate the original formula to a new reality that exists now that property tax values have spiked. And that's really what happened, is that once the property tax values spiked, the current mill levy override formula measures the relationship of three key independent variables, one being property tax value, second being what is the median income and the wealth of the school district, and the third being what is the total program of the district, what size of district are we talking about, how much money are they trying to raise. And so those are independent variables. When they move significantly disproportionately, then the model needs to be recalibrated, and we haven't done that yet, so it's still operating on the original assumptions. And so I think taking the opportunity to recalibrate it with the working group is the right path forward versus this kind of scorched earth approach that Five Star is putting forward just because there's more I want to say.
Yeah.
So, but I'm trying not to.
Well, no, your words are similar to what some of the other members of the committee expressed as well.
Mm-hmm.
So. Okay.
I tried to work with Five Star throughout the course of last year, and they're not a good listening group. So, so they never heard, they never cared to hear. And
Yeah.
they were willing to go to the point of blowing up the new School Finance Act if they had to. And so it was really unfortunate tact that they took, without tact. Yeah, last year. So we have meetings scheduled every month for this working group, and I am confident. I'm very confident, hopeful that recalibration of it will be all that we need. So.
Okay. So we're going to advocate for the working group to continue.
What's the recommendation on this particular one? Can you scroll up just?
We didn't do a recommendation for this one. We didn't get it. The committee did not feel that we wanted to forward this with a positive recommendation.
Okay.
We wanted to leave it up to the delegation to decide and vote on. The delegation can decide and vote on whether there's a favorable recommendation or it's on consent, but we wanted this one to have a good discussion. So we put it on. Any resolutions that submitted goes to the delegation regardless. Okay, so moving very quickly, this one has a favorable recommendation. This is, again, St. Vrain. This is to update the Public Schools Contract Act. This one basically is to include a provision requiring third-party vendors that contracts with schools to indemnify schools and districts for failing to comply with Colorado's accessibility standards. What this means is, let's say that we have a Grace Best discussion coming up. Let's say we contract with a company for Grace Best and they don't do something that meets IDEA standards. This is basically meant to hold harmless to school districts, that it's not a school district's fault that a contractor failed to address the needs of the student population. I think we can give a real-world example, and I hope I'm not opening a can of worms here. Lewis Palmer Elementary School took a while to get that vestibule put in, and that wasn't on the backs of our maintenance crews or our district staff really trying to get that done. That was between the contractors, the proper permits, and so it shouldn't hold us accountable, is basically what this is. I didn't go too far there, did I?
No, I don't think so. But there was no legal issue in play.
Right.
With that.
No, not with
Us.
ours.
Yeah.
But so basically, if there's a legal issue, that's all that is.
Yeah.
So, and we forwarded this with favorable recommendation. Okay. And again, this is all, to me, this all still falls on local control. And that is it. Discussion over, unless there's anything else you guys want to add. No? Okay, then I will give you back the floor. Thank you all for going through that with me. And I appreciate that you trust me to make wise choices and decisions, but I also believe that we as a board are 5 members. I do not have the sole voice and the sole decision-making power or capability for D38's Board of Education, so I think it's important that we discuss it together. Okay. B2, capital needs review and Grace Best discussion.
All right, thank you for this, and we're very good. Melissa has prepared a few documents for our review, and first we'll review. We've asked, this has been actually a board request, as well as administrative request, to look at all of the capital needs across the district, look at not only what is yet to be done, but what have they worked on, has the team actually completed in the last 3 years, so that we'll look and review, as well as looking forward. And then look at, like, in the process as well as the projects. And then that will lead us into a Grace Best discussion. And the Grace Best discussion is meant for a preliminary overview of what the needs are with a comprehensive overview of that. And then what are 4 different ways in which we could potentially resolve making sure that building is either operational, or that we make decisions that make sense for all of our students. Today is not about making any decisions around any of this, but it is really so that you all as board have a full scope of the projects in totality across the district, and then specifically as it relates to Grace Best. So thank you, Melissa, for all of your work on this, and from Mr. Ridgway for all of your leadership in this area. I know it's been a lot of work, so thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right. So I'm going to start with capital process. We're kind of starting with a new process on how we've been allocating and deciding on which projects are going to get funded. And so what we'll start with is, sorry, I'm going to navigate here. What is capital? And so really, we can purchase land, we can improve our buildings, we can do a construction of a new place or an addition to our structures, and it can be acquisition of equipment or vehicles or buses. We can also do lease purchase agreements, that type of thing. However, we do want to make sure that our capital projects have a minimum of $5,000.
Go ahead.
Okay, because we feel that the smaller projects, usually they're school oriented, that they can find another funding source for that instead of taking the capital budget, which is something to deal with the larger scale projects that we can't typically afford to do. So we do have, as we do this, we walk the buildings on an annual basis, and we have a capital site audit team, which is going to consist of the facilities director, the grounds director, the building manager. We invite the principal if they would like to come. Most often they want the feedback from that, and we did do this year over the summer when they were not available. The maintenance tech that's responsible for that site, and who else do we have? The custodial supervisor, just people who are very familiar with each individual building. And then we also have a capital prioritization team. So after we gather all the information, when we're trying to decide the priorities, we sit down with, again, the people who have neutral interest. They've seen all of the buildings, so they can make a good comparison amongst all of the sites that we have. And we know sometimes carpet's a big deal, and everybody sees through their lens, my carpet's the worst. But when we've seen every building, we know which is the worst, so we can make some decisions that way. So we'll have, again, our grounds manager, facilities manager, our custodial supervisor. I will be there, but we also bring in the director of finance because they're ultimately going to be responsible for this budget, and the director of safety and security because they really do see things from a different perspective.
And just to iterate there, the audit team, how long are those walks? Did you say that already?
No, I did not.
Okay.
So typically high school will take a minimum of one full day. Sometimes it breaks into a second day.
So these are not just walkthroughs. Using the word audit is pretty intentional with this. It's kind of going through and really reviewing and getting into the details of the systems and the properties.
Okay. Is that one better?
Is it this one?
Yep.
Okay, so I'll talk to this slide and I'll zoom in here a little bit. This slide has actually been in the budget book a couple of times, and my point in this is just to emphasize that capital spends happen throughout the budget. It's not just in one single fund. We put a lot of emphasis in what happens in Fund 43 because that's where the bigger projects happen, and I call those capital improvement and maintenance projects. And so those happen there. That's when we provide the list, and we'll go through this list here about what might be on the project list coming forward. But there are things that happen elsewhere in general fund, either in Fund 10 or Fund 15. I call these items versus projects, so they're smaller scale and funded differently, sometimes even funded just by the school or the department themselves. So if a school has some carryover money from a prior budget year, like they did in Lewis Palmer Middle School, coming off of the 22-23 year, they had quite a bit of carryover, and they were able to take that money, and as their decision to invest it in the building itself, doing some painting and doing some carpet and whatnot. And so they did that decision, but it's a capital item, so we still need to work it with our team and treat it as a capital item. Fund 43 again is where our usual stuff is happening, and Fund 44 is capacity projects, and I've spoken to you a little bit about capacity projects because that's really what we're doing with the Career and Innovation Center. This is an additional capacity. We're adding capacity to the system here, and so that's going to be processed through Fund 44, separate from Fund 43 or those other funds. And then if we were to get to the point where we were doing a large-scale capacity project, a new building or a rebuilding, reconstruction of a building, significant remodeling of several buildings, whatever, those would have other fund identifiers as well. So there is a process that we want to match up with the process that Melissa is driving in terms of evaluating individual needs. Any questions on that?
Any questions? Mr. Schwartz, any questions?
Now it's time, thank you.
Okay.
Do we miss a page? Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so district is going to maintain a master capital list. Anything that gets added is either through one of the site walks that we've done. It can be added by any staff member or principal within any building, and all they need to do is let one of us that's on that capital prioritization team or audit team know that they need to have something added to it. Any department can add something to it. So any board member can add something to it. So we just take and compile a list of every need throughout the district. And then when we, on the needs list, we put not only what the project is, we also put a description so that it can be justified, because a year down the road when we're actually prioritizing, it's kind of hard to remember what that was about. And then we put a contact person who added that to the list, so when we have questions, we know who it goes to. We put a date, so it's date stamped. So if we have windows that have been breezy for 20 years, we probably need to start escalating that. It's been on the list for a long time. We can put in a year of needs. So sometimes we'll have recycle or replacement cycles. So like every 20 years, we need to replace a roof in a building. So we can put out 20 years a need. So we're going to see those with a way lower priority, but it's there for monitoring and tracking. The removal, nothing comes off of these lists unless the project has been completed, a principal tells us that's no longer needed, something like that happens. So we'll kind of go through the process here. After we've collected all of the information through the year, and this is an ongoing list, it never ends, so people can add up to the very last day we prioritize and add something in the next day. But we've tried to give them buckets, categories, so that we can start the prioritization process. So for us, we have the mandatory items. These are things like if you guys did the safety vestibules, every school is going to get one of those. That was a directive, that becomes a mandatory item. Followed by a priority one, which is going to be health, safety, ADA, and code compliance. So if we have some sort of a walkthrough when we are written up, that will automatically become a priority one. If we're violating an ADA requirement, that will be a priority one. Priority twos are going to be imminent failure. I'm going to go back up to priority one. I apologize. That also impacts somebody from doing their job. So if we have a piece of equipment that breaks and somebody cannot work, that is also a priority one. Priority twos are imminent failures. That would be like an HVAC system that we're just band-aiding together. We know one day this year it's not going to function. End of life, which is the replacement cycle. Priority fours are going to be potential failure in the next 2 years. Priority fives are deferrable but necessary. Priority sixes are going to be deferrable with a return on investment. And so something like this would be like an LED lighting upgrade. We want to do it. It makes sense financially, but it's not necessary. We can still educate kids. Priority 7 are desirables. And then there's also priority 8 that's not on here. That's where I hold all of the projects that are 5 years down the road for those replacement cycles. Thank you.
Next page.
So once we get them sorted, once we get them sorted by those priority levels, we will compare the dollar amounts. We're going to ballpark cost all of these. They are not going to be exact costs because we currently have like 185 projects on the list and we are not done collecting those. We can't bother all of our contractors for every little detail. So we ballpark them. We figure out how much money we have for the next year. So if we're given $3 million, we'll draw the line at $3 million. How many of these things can we fund? So if we get through all the priority ones and part of the priority twos, we now go through and figure out the level of urgency by ranking them. So we're going to have a lot of debates and these conversations about, okay, so HVAC equipment is very important. If we have a cold building, the kids are going to be impacted. If I also have a truck that's broken, that I can't plow the snow to get kids to school, that's also very important. So we battle it out, which is more important, getting kids in a warm space or getting them to school. And so we're going to have those tough conversations to be able to bring back for a recommendation on what projects. Once we figure out what projects and the number we're going to be able to do, we're going to take this recommendation to Brett, the Chief Business Officer. We're going to have him review them and then ask us questions. We're going to go back, get those answered. Sometimes there may be an opportunity to fund them through another source besides capital. It might be a grant fund, it might be school budget. There's just other ways that we can find money. And then once we have a pretty good list, we have all the questions answered, we'll have our superintendent review that list, and then we'll make a final recommendation to the board. Well, actually for funding that goes through the board presentation for the budget for the next fiscal year.
So just one thing I didn't mention when I was at the slide about the different funds and things like that. You know, there was a time, maybe Tiffany remembers this, where there was a statutory requirement for how much money of our general fund PPR we were supposed to assign to capital projects every year. That provision went away during the Great Recession, but that still is kind of a target to keep in mind, how much money the state traditionally wanted to see for us to invest in capital projects, and that was 3% of PPR. So 3% of PPR, when we have basically a $50 million-ish budget, is about $1.5 million. We've been investing twice 2x that the last couple of years. So we're doing, from that perspective, really well in trying to, in quote unquote, catching up and getting to a point where we know that we're in a good place. That's not that there aren't things that need to be done, but we are in a good place with our capital facilities. And so that will become a question again every year: is how much do we want to continue to invest? Because we've been doing $3 million each of these last couple of years. But that will become a decision point each year as we go forward. Do we maintain that level? Do we trim back? Do we even push ahead?
All right, and I think the last thing just to kind of point out is once we work through all of the projects, we do hold a percentage of contingency. Any project that goes under budget, that money goes back to that contingency spot. And then once we're finished with all of our projects, then we can release next highest priorities to get funded in that same fiscal year, just to make sure that we're doing it as prioritized previously. So does anybody have questions as it relates to the process of capital?
Patty, any questions? No, sir. Todd? Ron, do you have any
No.
questions?
No questions for change. Thank you.
So I just want to say thank you, because I think this is very valuable, not just for the board, but also for the community to recognize, and our staff, on how are the decisions made and what is the process that goes into all of this. And we see in our budget every year, here's our priorities that we want to tackle, that we see in the proposed budget, but how does that come about and how is that prioritized? So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay.
All right. So now, still in kind of the capital realm, we're going to kind of look at some of the historic projects that we've done over the past few years. And of course, I'm going to do my best to speak to them, but I wasn't here for them. So looking at just the district priority operations facility planning, we're going to just kind of abide by the intent of keeping our facilities safe and clean and functional. So in the year 21-22, we had a couple different funding sources these were grouped. So when you see the presentation that Brett has, he's going to have them outlined individually. I have them grouped together just kind of help things fit into a category. So like removing modulars, there were 4 sites that was done. So for the Fund 43, we spent about $5 million, and that included HVAC equipment, removing modulars, chillers, asphalt, concrete, playground maintenance, and bus leases and purchasing vehicles. And there was also grant funds that were used that same year, and they were BEST grants, which like boilers and HVAC repairs for ESSER funds.
So again, on this list, keep an eye on that line that says energy upgrade, for these next couple slides, because she mentioned separate financing. That's something, of course, that we finance separately, but we still show it as an expense, as a capital expense, but it wasn't strictly funded by the general fund allocation for that year. So for the 21-22 year, in your mind, you can kind of take off that 2.4 million from this 5.1, and that can tell you kind of how much general fund money was spent for that year.
Can I ask a question? And maybe I apologize, it is going in the weeds, but I'm going to ask it anyway because it's in front of us. What's the difference between the ideal surface between asphalt and concrete? I see that talked about a lot in our parking lots.
Yeah, so our asphalt is going to be the parking lot itself. It's going to be the black surface that we see. And they are used in some of our elementary playgrounds. It's used in our parking lots. It's used in the track surfaces. But our concrete is going to be concrete curbing, or the little ramps that go up to the sidewalks for ADA access, or we just have concrete all over the place.
So.
Yeah, sidewalks, the curbing that goes to the playgrounds, all of that's concrete. So that's more of the white colored.
What lasts longer or is more sustainable to wear and tear, concrete or asphalt?
It depends on the use.
Okay.
Concrete tends to be much more expensive per linear foot. Asphalt does tend to last longer, but it's also harder on knees and that type of stuff for kiddos.
Okay. Thank you for indulging me.
All right. So same thing with the 22-23 school year. We had some Fund 15 projects, but I don't really know what they were doing with these. I only really had title in there. And then the Fund 43 projects that we had, am I in the 22 stuff? So we had a leach field, we had isolation valves, which is going to be more HVAC oriented, sewer line repairs, more HVAC chillers. So HVAC is both the heating side and the cooling side. Asphalt repair, concrete repair, door repairs, fencing. Again, you see the energy upgrade is on here. There were roof repairs and a Schneider lease, vehicle leases and bus leases. But then we also have the grant funds at the end, which were ESSER for HVAC, best grant boiler. ESSER had some building improvements, and there was a Medicaid sped bus.
So we have a $5 million number here on the energy upgrade as part of that. And just to go back to that corridor compliance, that was the Lewis Palmer Elementary School, kind of the additional things that came after, as we were working on that vestibule. Other things came up that they had to pursue and correct while we had things open.
Right, and that would be an example of an unexpected cost, right?
Yes, very much so.
And the items with the asterisks had another funding source outside of just capital. That's why they have the asterisks on them.
So for those 3 years, you see there has been quite a bit that's been pursued, and then as we go into, I think, this next year, current year, or last, that was
23, 24,
last
so
year,
last
sorry.
year, yeah. And so again, we have corridor compliance, and the reason is it spanned a 2-year window from the fiscal year. And then again, so Fund 15, door replacements, playgrounds, electrical, audio enhancement was a big one for 3 of the schools. And then we had the Fund 43, which I think that should have been ADA repairs, not ACA repairs. I apologize for that. bleacher project, there was a bus loop improvement, caulking, floor projects, HVAC, lots of parking lots, playgrounds, and I think that was this year actually, I was thinking roof replacements, sewer lines, and water fountain replacements. Then we had grant funds, again, HVAC for ESSER. CDOT had a safe routes to schools. This has been a multi-year project. It just didn't look like any funds had gotten spent against them in the last 2 years slides that we had, but you'll see this come up again this year.
Another question, is the Safe Routes to School, the CDOT one, is that the grant that we had qualified for years back? There was a community project for the Safe Routes to School. Is that what that's part of?
It is.
Okay.
It is, and they've been working really hard on trying to get some movement on that, so we have
Good.
our RFP out for it right now for design, so we're making progress.
It's been only, what, 8 years?
It's unfortunately a classic situation of when there's several state agencies involved, and it just slows down to a snail's pace at that point when you have too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah. All right, and then our current year, these are projects that we're working on this year. So all of them that I have listed are Fund 43. Things will kind of divvy out into different funding sources as emergencies come up and that type of thing. You'll see more projects by the end of this fiscal year. But for right now, what we've got are the intercoms, playground surfaces, elevator modernizations, mag holds, lots of HVAC stuff, leveling a gym floor to make those bleachers work from the prior year's project. Parking lot lights for safety in the parking lot, roof repairs, carpet. What else have we got? Seal and coat, crack repair. We did the whole bus parking lot, so that's done for a few years. Septic, we had an emergency right there, the last couple of projects with the septic, the truck replacement, another truck replacement. These are all emergencies that have happened towards this last month. And so that's basically where we're at for this year.
I'll say on the what's listed as intercoms there is step 2 of the audio enhancement.
Yep.
Okay, so we have a 3-year project that we're pursuing for audio enhancement. This is the second one. What you also see there is we actually started pulling things off of here that related to the financings, like the Schneider payments, like bus lease payments. I'm putting those into Fund 15 and not commingling them here in Fund 43. So this Fund 43 can be really focused on the project work that's happening.
So I'm going to preempt your next slide where it says it's a working document.
Yes.
So these are the priorities that have been identified for the 2024-2025 school year. But let's say something, and I think you covered this, let's say something comes up like you sit in Kilmer's library. It's kind of a boiler room. It's pretty hot. So I don't know if that's an air conditioning thing or what, but let's say that Kilmer says, okay, we've got to get this library fixed, and we already have our budget here. Does something come off of here and take a back seat on this list, or do we just come up with more money
It is
somewhere?
identified as an emergency. Something can come off the list.
Okay.
And if we have enough in contingency, it can go that way. However, I did some research in Kilmer, and they do have AC in that library, so we need to figure out what's wrong.
Okay. Good to know.
Yes. All right, and so again, this is a living document. It's going to change. What you see in the master document today will not be what you see at time of prioritization. Currently, all of our internal building walks are finished. We've walked every nook and cranny, every closet, every space that you can imagine. We are starting the external walks in October, so we will get all those done, and we will be adding to the list from those findings. We're also currently working on all of the replacement cycles, and that's going to take us a bit of time to try to figure out what all of our systems are. And it's going to be everything from our HVAC units, our roofs, our trucks and buses and everything. So we'll work through that. I've already started with IT, figuring out what their cycles are as well. Currently have 185 items that have been identified to date. 52 priority ones have been identified preliminarily, and I have to say this because we haven't done our official prioritization, which is going to be probably in the February-March timeframe, but I did a preliminary just to kind of get some categories, so we would have something to discuss today at this board meeting. And currently, our priority ones total about $3.6 million. And then,
I got a question on that real quick.
Yes.
I didn't see it earlier or late August, early September. We did some walkthroughs, and I was over at Lewis Palmer, and they've got tabs glued to the windows because they won't close and won't operate. I didn't see it on the list.
okay. So I gave you the priority ones. It is on there, and I do want to say it should be, that's Palmer Lake Elementary.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me verify why we don't have the Lewis Palmer, because they're dealing with the same thing, and we figured a certain section of the building was actually a priority one because of the closures, that kind of thing. And so those are the pieces of information I need to make sure I understand to make sure we're getting the right priority ones. So once we get this identified, we have all of the projects outlined. I will be meeting with each of the principals to say, this is what I'm aware of. What do I not understand? What am I not seeing? What did I miss? And they will be able to help me with this list. And so we're identifying, we will meet with them, we'll get more feedback. So I will make sure that is on that list, mentioned that way, that their tab's holding it closed. And so this is, again, just kind of a real quick review of what could potentially be priority ones, and the funding that goes with them. I don't have the entire capital list ballpark costed yet. We will be working on that over the next couple months. There's a lot of ADA code compliance issues. The striker chair at Palmer Lake, since that building does not have an elevator, getting the kiddos up and down those stairs, round doorknobs instead of the lever requirements, just anything that we've been brought to our attention. Obsolete parts in some of our HVAC systems that we can't repair any longer because they don't make the pieces necessary to keep them functioning. So, any questions?
Yeah, I think I got one more. I think the first or second slide, priority number 7 was deferred. Is that are those things like maybe deferred maintenance or? Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions?
So the things that are on this list, to be clear, right, on this, with the background blue, are the things that you are aware of currently that are in priority 1, but that you're not through that process in its entirety yet for this year.
Correct.
And you will still be working through this list, and you'll be bringing that back to us. So we're, when that process kind of that you went through before, you're in the first couple of steps, but you've not made your way all the way through. This is not, you're not bringing this to the Board of Education today for
No.
approval. That was still coming, and there are still parts and pieces to work through.
Correct.
So if there are things that are not on here, it is simply because they've not yet been discussed and identified to make it on the list yet.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Yep, we get through the entire process. We will be February, March timeframe
Okay.
doing our final prioritization, so you guys will see that with the budget update at that time.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So as we move into the Grace Fest conversation, because I think we're ready for that, I recognize that there has been a lot of quality input and community conversation about this, and certainly in the last several years, some of which many of you have also been a part of. And so I think that you will see, as Melissa really pulled this together for you all today, and as we discussed in preparation for today, that much of that is reflected in this document, and that we really want to honor and say word of appreciation for the work that has gone into getting us to this point, and that we will be, I think it is a commitment of our Board of Education currently to really take this into review and consideration, and once we make that decision, to be able to fully fund whatever it is that we decide. But we need to do that with knowledge of present day funding and dollars around what those costs look like in 2024. So again, just a note of appreciation and thanks for all the work that's kind of gotten us to this point, and to you for taking all of that and then bringing a report to us today.
Sure, yes. There was a ton of stuff to sort through. There was a ton of work that's been done on
Yes.
Grace Best over many years. And so, giving you guys just a little bit of background, about 65 years ago, Grace Best opened as a high school. And about 25 years later, they did some extensive renovations to open that up as Grace Best Elementary School. Over that time, there's been a lot of wear and tear, and we've had some, community perception and just a lot of things have happened to that building. And so something happened in the 80s. It was either where they did the addition to the building and the connection between the two didn't go well, maybe bad roofing product, but something happened that caused extensive leaking between those two building units. And so over the years, there's been just leaks and unidentified problems that have just culminated over the years to being kind of a problem that hasn't been addressed. And so there's been some issues with information getting out to the public about asbestos and maybe some misconstrued information on the detriment to children because it really is non-friable. So it's in and around pipes and it's in mastic and that kind of stuff. There's been a ton of abatement done. There's still some asbestos in that building that we're not going to be able to get to because it is down in the pipes. But in 2015, Colorado Department of Education did school assessments across the state, and they found that the building had about $8.9 million worth of deficits at that time. And so just ongoing analysis of options, so really there's just a lot that needs to be done to take care of the building, make it an asset again. And so about 5 years ago, about 5 years ago, they did a lot of assessments to figure out what the condition of this building and what needs to be done. But there's a fire report in here that we need to discuss a little bit too that gives us a 1-year timeline to figure some things out.
Can I just pause for a minute for a point of privilege to say this introduction is a really thorough analysis of the timeline and the story. I would use that, the narrative and the story that's gone into every time Grace Best talks about getting put to rest and kicking the can down the road. And so this is a really well-written analysis.
Oh,
The only thing missing from here, which is the next one, on the next slide, is the work that was done most recently with that, to your point. And I also want to say thank you to our community members and our staff that engaged in that. In fact, Mr. Brown was on that committee. It was during COVID, and that was before you were even on the board.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you this is very well put together. I just want to say that.
Yeah, so we give you a little timeline just looking at the onset of the building all the way through where we currently are. And so I know you see like the economic downturn in 2008. That is pivotal to understanding some of the reason why those kids were even moved out and into Creekside Middle School, turning that into Bear Creek. So all of those pieces came together to get where we are today. Let's get in here. So again, we are looking at that 2020 when there was that big facility assessment that was done. And in 2021, the facility master plan committee that came together and a ton of work done by that committee. And in May of 21, there was a board presentation with some recommendations that were made. And so looking at the next slide, this is stuff that had been done by the previous committee. And so as we're looking at this is nothing that I made up. It should just be kind of bringing to light some of the work that had previously been done. But looking at this building and the color coding that went with the time period in which each addition had been made. The one thing I do want to give a little caveat is, how do you do the little? This little section here, I do not believe was part of that 88 edition. I think that may be a little bit older. So I really think that 88 edition is just this piece here.
Okay.
I couldn't quite tell which area was the bordered in pink.
Yeah,
It's no longer-
Oh, so we're going to come down to this next section here. And so the area in pink that we're discussing is this section here, which based on the reports I found, there's a recommendation in 2020 that decided that area was not suitable for students. And then over time, the little area bracketed here in the purple is what the seniors came in and did some, they're not in-depth modifications, but try to make it at least habitable and so they could occupy that space and lease that out.
So that area in pink behind, the gymnasium, right?
Yep.
Locker rooms.
Yeah,
yeah,
so this is where we did have some of the homeschool middle school students. Oh, yep, this area right here. Yeah, and that is still not great.
Straight out of a Steve King movie.
Yeah. All right. So in 2020, I don't know.
Any more questions before we do this?
Any more questions or comments before we keep going? Ron?
Okay.
Not in this section. I have some for later, thanks.
Okay.
Okay. So there were many assessments that were done by lots of organizations, but the most thorough one I found was facilities assessment that was done by KPE Architecture and Engineering, and I want to say they're out of Kansas. So apparently at some point in time, there was a request to have somebody out of state for a non-biased assessment of this building. And so I was able to connect with these guys. They were out here on a business trip, stopped in and looked at that building one more time. Not in depth, but basically what they were able to do was give me some information on the next slides on some updated costing. But in that report, they found critical items. And there was everything from issues on the interior and exterior of the building to include doors and windows and joint sealant, accessibility with ADA non-compliance, HVAC and mechanical issues, electrical issues. And these critical findings are only enough to address making the building function as a whole again, but does not address anything such as updated safety and security protocol that we see at our other buildings, or anything that would turn it into a space that would be usable as we would need to see it used, because we may not have the same programs that we would have had at that time.
ADA.
The next section that they did was the items that were considered beyond life. So not just end of life with HVAC or mechanical or plumbing, but beyond the end of life. So things that are on the verge of failing. And so they have a list again with the interior and exterior of the building, the mechanical and plumbing, electrical. And then the items I just have down here is not identified in that report would be anything else we would need as far as a safe entry and surveillance cameras and other items. So when we were in this year, the Monument Fire Department did not realize that there were students in this building, so had not done any fire walks over the past few years. And then when they had heard that there were students in this building, they scheduled a fire walk with us. And the chief was very, very patient, but you could see frustration and anger radiating over his face. He stopped the report. He gave us a list of findings, but this was not in its entirety. Basically, he asked that we take a good hard look at what's best for students. We come up with a plan for him within the next year, and he was not going to do a documented report. He's giving us a year to work through things. So the stuff in here is really just making sure we have the leaking and the moisture issues that were occurring in the walls, all of that. Drywall replaced, the ceiling tiles replaced. There were some other things such as daisy chains and that kind of stuff that are easy enough to fix. But we were also storing a lot of stuff in there. And he basically said that this building was not designed to store anything. So if we want to use it as storage, we can, but there shall be no people in that building. Or the other way around, if we're going to kick kids and people in the building, there may not be any storage. We are currently working on a plan to get all of that out of there. But he also felt that the repairs necessary to get this to where he would like to see it are expensive. So
So before we go on, before you go on to any recommendations forward, what questions might we have
Or comments?
or comments, yeah? And
I have a question with respect to this section on fire safety, and I apologize, the audio is a little challenging. I assume we're still on the fire safety,
Yes.
Marine Fire Department slide.
Yep. Go for it.
Thank you. So, Melissa, in general, I suspect there's some type of a fire rating mechanism, fire safety rating mechanism. And I would be curious where the fire department and or fire inspector / chief rated this structure in its current condition.
He
Do we have
did
any
not.
data on that?
He did not provide us with anything like that. I can ask him.
So maybe same question, different way. Sounds like they gave you a gut feel for it without anything formal. On a 1 to 10 scale, with 10 being fantastic and very safe, 1 being get your kids out of the structure. Where did you get the impression that the structure currently was at, based on the posture and the communications with the fire department?
He would have put it probably at a 1.
And can you share with him what he did share with you about not giving say that again, and with a little more depth around, he did not submit a report, and there was a reason for that, and that he instead did this with these findings, gave the 12 months. So can you share a little bit more about what he shared with you, which I think would give insight to Ron's question?
Okay, so basically he felt that if he were to write us up the way it needed to be done and submitted that to the state, that we would be asked to vacate the kiddos out of the building.
Which we need to anyway.
We do.
But he
I'm
gave us
sorry, I
everything from
had some challenges in hearing that. Could someone please paraphrase it?
Yes, so what he said was that he's not doing a formal write-up to the state so that we have an opportunity to have a plan to get our students out of the building.
Correct, within the next 12 months.
Within the next 12 months. If he submits a formal one, then there's different ramifications for that. So he gave us the leeway to solve the problem in a timely manner, basically. He gave us a big, fat, huge warning of
Yes.
take care of this and get it done.
Thank you.
Yeah, this page is not, this is just our recording of his verbal comments. There's nothing written at this point, because if it was written, then it would have to be submitted. And so they have given us this feedback, and that we can come bring this to you and have this conversation.
But it sounds like the warning is a non-negotiable.
Correct. He wants to see that we're making updates to the building. He wants photograph documentation that we're making progress on that, or a plan that we've got in place to submit to him by the next time he comes back.
Okay. Did you understand that, Ron? We have to submit a plan.
In order for it to be habitable, we have to take action.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. Otherwise, it's not habitable for educational purposes. Is that correct?
His phrasing was more of doing what's right for students, not that they can't do what they're doing in the space as it is,
Right.
but to do what's best for their education. And looking at the space, he does not feel that that is what's best for students.
Yeah. Okay. So the bigger piece is in its current form or fashion, it's really not. We work very hard to try to make our facilities safe from a physical security standpoint. And it appears that this particular structure is not safe from a fire security standpoint.
Correct.
Is that a very blunt summary of what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Thank you for the straightforward and honest answer.
Sure.
Any others? Burning a lot. Okay, continue on, please.
All right. So next are the options that were both presented at the time that the assessment was done with the committee, as well as looking at it again with a fresh set of eyes and some updated costs. And so if we took that list from KPE and did only the critical items, which is not including the past life items, at the time they did the assessment, which I believe was 2020, that would have cost us $8.293 million. But with the escalation in 2024, they reran those numbers, which is 12.7 million. Keeping in mind, that's not vetting it against Colorado contractors, but it was in Kansas with their software that they used. I have a plus sign after that because if we were to do this and only make it exactly what it is, we would still need to make it safe for kids with surveillance cameras, safe entries, and a few other things.
Which you estimated to be about another approximately.
Another million.
1 million, you said? 1 million. So
It-
we're looking at 13,700,000 approximately.
And again, I just want to reemphasize,
Right.
we're presenting this information to you for you to
Correct.
have level set, and because we're not making a decision here, but we're looking for a decision
In the future.
in a future meeting, in a soon future meeting.
And-
Hold on one second. Just one last question. I saw, I think maybe it was, somebody made a comment about making new routes for buses and cars, ingress and egress. Is that inclusive in that 12 million? So that's going to be part of the plus.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yes, and also keep in mind the plus would be immediate capital needs on that building because it doesn't address the past life items.
And I assume that everybody's going to have to be relocated during this construction phase if we go this route?
Not necessarily. There are ways to segregate off sections of buildings to be able to perform work and keep kids safe and out of harm's way while they're doing construction. You can do temporary walls. So there are ways of managing them. It is easiest if they are not on site.
And those areas would be compliant with the fire inspectors?
We would end up having to take them, yes,
Okay.
compliant enough that we would have that plan that would satisfy the fire inspector, letting him know that we're making progress towards correcting the problems with the building. And then we would end up taking the kids from one location of the building after the construction of another space was done, moving them to a good space while we construct the area that they are in or repair.
Is there a time frame associated with that option?
I don't have
Gut
that.
feel, 1
So
year?
I would say about a year, only because we would not have to design anything. It was exactly
Okay.
as is, so it's getting more than anything lead time items ordered and installed.
Thank you.
Okay, the second option is to raise and rebuild. And so this is tearing everything completely out and starting fresh. And so with this, in 2020, the costs were about $26 to $28 million, and that was at $442 a square foot. We're currently at about $560 a square foot. But I don't know how they derive their costs, so I did the costing formula the way I would normally do it, and I vetted it through a contractor, but about $46 million in today's rates to make sure that we could get that site completely cleared, asbestos-free, and rebuilt, and that could turn it into what we needed to for the program we needed to take care of site circulation and a bunch of other issues. Okay, the third option is going to be to only demo, completely just tear it down and just have a nice bare piece of land for some future use. And again, in 2020, we were looking about 1.4 million. And right now, talking to contractors, it depends on the season. So we're talking 1.3 to 1.6 million to just tear it down and have a nice piece of land. Because we still have to abate it, even though we're just tearing the building down. And then our fourth option is to demo everything prior to the 1988 addition, tear everything else down and keep that addition. And so this is the resolution that was passed by the Board of Education on June 14th of 21. And so if we do this, it's not just tearing that section down because we have mechanical systems and everything else tied into the old building. So we would still have to do a small building to connect to the main building to house the boilers or whatever we need to operate the building. In 2020, that cost was about 9.1 to 9.3 million, and today's cost is about 11.2 million. And again, this was run through a contractor to verify costs on this. And then,
So before we get to your professional recommendation, any questions from board? Ron?
Yeah, I have another question. I'm wondering if there's a fourth option, or maybe a fifth option. I see 1 through 4 here. Is there an option to do nothing and have the building be unoccupied and just allow it to sit there, even though it may not be consistent with utilization ratios? I'm just trying to really understand all of the community's options with respect to this asset which the community owns.
I mean, absolutely you can leave it, and then it becomes a liability instead of an asset for the district. As it sits there, you still need to heat it and things like that, so you have the electrical ongoing just to keep it from pipes breaking and that type of thing. You still have the maintenance of mowing and the curb appeal type side of it, but it is an option, but we couldn't then use it for anything really.
In the spirit of understanding all of our options, would it then be prudent to add this last option that we discussed as one of,
Yeah, we can put it in there if you
with
would
full
like.
understanding there's a reoccurring cost
Sure, we
associated
can
with
add
having
that.
it sit empty?
Okay. They said yes, they can add that.
Does the board agree that might be a prudent thing to do?
Ron, what are your thoughts behind that?
I just want to make sure we really understand all of our choices.
So you don't have a post vision leaving it there. I figured you'd ask the question because you had some other fleeting thoughts that you might have used for that.
I mean, that goes a little further in this conversation. I want to understand the utilization ratio that we think we should be hitting for all of our structures and where this sits within that ratio
Okay.
in terms
Yeah.
of the return on an asset, right? But the fact of the matter is, if we're looking at our options, one of our options is likely empty it out and do nothing.
You could sell it.
But that's my point is I don't know that we really, and this was part of the challenge back in 2021, is that I don't know that we really reviewed the full suite of options. And we didn't really have much in terms of a criteria around the options. And therefore, one option is probably to empty it of at least students, including HSE and transitions, and let it sit empty. I'm not advocating that's the quality option at all. I'm saying that if we're looking at our options, let's look at our options.
So the committee vetted a lot of different options. Now, the committee may have landed on the recommendation to the board that some committee members agreed, didn't agree. There were options on the table. But doing nothing was discussed in committee. The committee determined that doing nothing was not a responsible use of taxpayer dollars.
I mean, that's still just kicking the can down the road, and we're still incurring a lot of
case,
additional costs.
are we purely doing committee options here? Are we looking 3 years later at all the options?
Well, hopefully we're not kicking the can down the road anymore. We're going to address this one way or another. That's the goal, right?
Yes.
Concur?
That is.
Agreed.
I sure hope so, yeah.
And I would agree that it's not a responsible option to just let it sit there. And that we,
And I think maybe we note that
yes, we do.
in the community that the board has determined that we were going to actually physically take an action.
So do we want it on the list when it's not responsible and it's not one of the ones we're going to consider?
That's a great idea. It's poor asset utilization.
The only reason I could see making the staff do more work for that is how much would it cost to sit there if we were looking to liquidate it as is. But
I mean, I could see it being useful to know how much it's costing us just to sit there doing nothing.
oh, that you make a good point. How much is it costing taxpayers to sit and do nothing?
There's always costs to do nothing. That's right.
And that may be something we're asked.
I just think it's important to get this on the table.
Sure.
So that 5 years from now or 1 year from now, they say, what's the why? The why is we're done kicking the can down the road. It's time to actually physically take an action and hold this asset to the same standards that the others are held to.
So that could be an idea, Ron, and let's also dive into what the recommendation is, because maybe there's more to it. But Mr. Norris had a question, a comment as well.
Yeah, just two more questions. What finance vehicle would we use for these options?
Brett gets creative.
Well, save for the demo only. That's probably the only thing we could just cash finance our own. And anything else, we'd have to be seeking some type of financing for.
Any concerns between the CTE and financing these and having two notes out there?
Not concerned from that regard, only that if the CTE is being pursued with the freed up fund balance, the freed up captive fund balance. And so the financing there is more of a matter of convenience for that project management, and it's definitely intended to be very short term. Versus if we did something here, it would probably be a medium to longer term financing.
Okay. No worries.
No worries from a credit perspective. No. Again, the question would be, what is the funding source to repay that financing? Without there being a specific revenue stream, then it's going to have to come out of general fund PPR every year.
Okay, and then one last question, unless somebody else says something that makes me think of another question, right? What I'm concerned of, if we do the demo, do we have a capacity study, a dual capacity study where we may have to build a school in another 2 years, and then we go to the community and we ask them for a bond to go finance another school 2 years from now, and we just spent $1 million demolishing one. Now we need the community to cough up $30 million to build another one.
They'd have to cough up that anyway to make it based on option number.
Option one for $12 million.
Yeah, but if you,
The reason,
12 plus.
but that still wouldn't make it, that 12 million still would not bring it up to the same standards of what our education buildings are. It wouldn't have we wouldn't have safety and security, for example, updated in it.
Well, so it's 12 plus. So let's, maybe 20 million to bring it up to standards.
I would really want to go through and figure out all of the cost on the past life systems to verify that.
And I'm just pointing out the optics there. If
Sure.
we demolish it and then we ask somebody to go rebuild it.
And then your question, that is the next on my agenda, is to go through and provide you with information on the capacities of our building, which is then followed up. I have kids geocoded so we can start looking at developments and how many kids that's going to generate over what period of time, so we can do a really good study on where we're going to be at with capacity needs.
And you will have that information before we ever make a decision on this, so
Sure.
that we can answer your question about what does that look like moving forward, and if there is an ask inside of that, based on your decision on this and based on the capacity study.
I get where you're coming from, but I think a lot of people agree that this is not a very good location to have an elementary school, having those hundreds of cars coming and going a couple times a day, plus just the amount of money it would take to get it to be usable again. I mean, at that point, we're not far from just building a new school in the right place. I mean, we're seeing where the new developments coming in, it's pretty much in the Jackson Creek area and in the Forest Lakes area, and we have space in both of those areas to build an elementary school.
And if you've ever driven down downtown Monument, when even just the HSCA gets out of school and a train is going through, it's a disaster.
Now, I think it would actually take some town cooperation to fix some road issues to start putting that many cars over there.
But it's still valuable input to say, what do the optics look like on this too? I think that's an important piece to remember. So thank you for bringing that to light.
Well, and I also think as we're talking about the different options, there's a lot more that we can get into on the pros and cons of different options as far as overall maintenance costs, the flexibility of the space. I mean, operation, if it were modernized and a more flexible space, I think it could be a lot more useful to us. It should be cheaper to maintain. We have the opportunity, if we're doing something new, to change the layout on the property and something that's better suited. So I mean, I think there's just a lot more that goes into just the cost alone. So, I mean, as you mentioned, I was on that committee. That the final recommendation was to tear down the old part and keep the newer part, and I personally felt like that was the completely wrong answer. I felt like the committee was almost guided in that direction with a predetermined outcome, but I mean, to me, that doesn't make sense at all. So I want to make sure we do a good thorough analysis on what makes the most sense.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
The next page is,
I guess Ron has one more. Mr.
Well, I wanted to, if it's okay, I wanted to just make a request, and it may already be part and parcel of the analysis that Melissa and team are going to do. When you get a little more detail on the cost to bring it up to speed for an educational facility, a simple graph that shows the tipping point where the curves would cross from fix existing to start new would be pretty valuable. Explain rationale around purely the financial piece, and especially when one's tearing down something that's decades and decades old. Usually one incurs significantly higher costs once walls get opened up and things begin to get moved. If there's a graphical representation where that tipping, it's often very easy to explain.
okay.
And that exists in the architect world, right? I don't remember what it's called, where you have that graph that shows the cost.
The
effective-
feasibility studies type
Yeah.
things, yeah.
Yeah, good idea.
We actually have a chief business officer that usually has a spreadsheet for that.
Could even maybe make a graph.
His PowerPoint is now 400 pages. Thanks, Ron.
You can always count on me.
All right, let's go ahead and keep on going.
Okay.
10:30.
So we did have a recommendation from, we had both the architect that is helping us with the CTE facility come out and walk this, as well as one of the contractors that they asked to bring with. And they made a recommendation, but just to clarify, it's not a recommendation based on what the needs of our community is. It's solely just asset itself. And so what they felt is that demolishing the 59 portion of the building and trying to keep the 88 portion of the building was the most viable option. However, I keep hearing, I just want to clarify this with everybody, we keep hearing we could save the gymnasium, and they are saying that that is not a viable option because they are seeing retrofitted struts that were added to the structure to reinforce the stability of what was originally there. They said that they've had some roofing structure that they've not been able to identify what it is that adds weight to that, which is causing the underlying system to deteriorate, and is also feeling that it's potentially trapping moisture in there. So just that is also at end of life.
Aw. Such a pretty gym.
It is beautiful gym, and they said the floor is probably more valuable than the rest of it put together. So that is their recommendation. However, the last thing I would just like to end with here is that we've had a bunch of people reach out. They all love this as part of the community and have a vested interest in it. There are some options out there for us. The town of Monument has asked if we would have interest in going with them, partnering with them on a Brownsfield grant. The Brownsfield grants are, let me see if I can find this really fast. They help assess and clean up any contaminated properties. That's what a Brownsfield property is. This could even be any rumor that there is something like we've had with asbestos being detrimental that hasn't allowed us to utilize the building to its fullest potential or sell it at its highest dollar because of some sort of a rumor out there. So they could help us test. They could help us with a lot of things. I don't know all the ins and outs of the grant yet, but that's something we could evaluate. In addition to that, Silver Key has interest in obtaining some grants. One of them that they would like to do is about $1 million to help replace the roof, in addition to some other repairs. 7070, our basketball team that's renting out the gymnasium, is interested in providing a donation to help with the roof. Palmer Device Soccer, if we could offer them a place to have a soccer field out there, is willing to donate in any way that they can. The great thing is we have a lot of community interest. The problem is $1 million doesn't start to take care of the problems we've got over there. So, any questions? We know we've got some more work to do on this for sure. We wanted to at least start this as a starting place for conversations so we can move forward to whatever decision we come to in the future.
Todd, I've got a question for you. In reading all of this over the weekend 3 or 4 times, asking questions of my husband who's in construction and other things, it seemed to me like the recommendation that was made some sense, to keep the newer buildings so that we have space. Because one of the things we have to do is figure out how do we replace the space for the kids, especially for homeschool and transitions. That's the big one, because that's us. So it seems like we could at least handle homeschool with the old space, or transitions with the old space. So could you tell us a little bit more about why that's a bad idea?
I mean, my personal opinion is that this is a prime piece of real estate right here in the middle of town that we could do something a lot more useful and a lot more beneficial to the community with than keeping this portion of an old school. I feel like we could probably find a better way to handle the transition students and something more conducive to their needs, which then leaves just HSCA. And again, I feel like we could find another way to accommodate them. I've never kept it a secret. I think that we should bulldoze the thing and make a community center of some sort here, and not try to make this a school area. We've got other areas where I think schools are more appropriate. This being downtown, I think we could do a much better job with a good master plan of some sort of community piece that would benefit everybody.
I agree with that.
And using that portion of that building that's stuck where it's stuck, I think it kind of limits us, because it's already there. It's already in that corner, and we'd be getting rid of half of the square footage and just keeping the rest. It's rigid and old, expensive to maintain, inflexible. I mean, these are solid concrete walls. They're not movable. You can't reconfigure anything. Right. So it's just a matter of just fixing the problems, putting a whole bunch of money into it, and it's still not a good long-term asset. It's not something that we're going to look at for the next 50 to 100 years, something that's a valuable part of this community or this district even.
No, I totally feel good about that idea. I mean, I think that idea makes loads of sense.
Of course, we got to find the money.
Well, the other question is, we've got to have a place for homeschool and for transitions right away, immediately, and I think transitions, and I don't know, I've got some ideas, and Tiffany and I've talked a bit about it, for handling transitions. I don't think either transitions or homeschool are going to work at another school. I would be really against transitions in a school.
No, I agree. And I don't want to speak out of turn here, but some options have been kicked around. I know we've all discussed, and I think that's probably the right direction to keep pursuing.
Okay.
I have an idea on the HSCA program, but I'd have to vet that a little bit. And it would also depend on how long. I mean, if we're just going to knock down the building now without an immediate plan, that's going to put us in limbo for a while. But if we know that we just have to make accommodations for, say, a year, or however long it's going to take us to do the work, then that's a whole different plan.
Yeah, that's true too.
I mean, obviously the CT Center helps a little bit. We're moving Barebotics, which is a big user of that program, out of there. So
right, and that's another program that has to be accommodated.
They're accounted for in the new space. So, I mean, I completely agree with you. We need to find a home for all these existing programs, of course, sooner than later. I mean, even if we don't do anything with this building right away, even if we take Ron's option 5, which is just sit on and do nothing, I don't think it's a healthy space for those people to be in right now,
It is.
period.
Right.
So either way, we have to
Okay.
do something.
So I'm just saying that part of this decision for me personally is what happens to Barebotics, and what happens to transitions, and putting transitions in a school for a year while we're doing other things probably is not a good option. It might be for homeschool. So I want that to be a really important part of our discussion of what we do is that we have plans.
Maybe this is that ideation thing. Like, I want to see the bigger plan. That's why I want to deal with this in little chunks that limit our options in the future and our flexibility. I want to make sure that we're coming up with what we think is a good overall big picture plan, and we start taking steps to make that happen. I mean, this can has been getting kicked down the road for decades now at this point. It's time to do something once and for all. Even if we don't get it perfect, at least do something.
What I applaud right now is, and I want to make it clear that it is obvious that we as a board and as a team recognize and prioritize the importance of taking care of our students, our transition students, and that we recognize that we're not going to quote unquote, not that anybody's here said that, but we're not going to just put them somewhere because they're not justs. They're individuals that deserve a healthy, conducive educational environment. And and then looking at the funding for that. So, for example, transitions, there are some options out there that we can model after what other school districts are doing. And maybe we go to Habitat for Humanity. Maybe we see if there's a BEST grant available. Something to make sure that we're taking care of. What goes in my mind from this whole thing is our number one priority is taking care of our students that are in that building and making sure that they are learning in the best environment that is where they're going to get the best educational value for them as our customers and for their parents and for our community, and that they deserve that educational space.
And I think we agree that where they're at right now is not suiting their needs well.
Yep.
So no matter what, we need to do something.
And then when we look at our community, what I do appreciate is the value that our community leaders see in the space. And so partnering with Silver Key and Town of Monument and 77 and Palmer Divide Soccer may not be exclusive of tearing it down or doing an addition, or only tearing part of it down and making sure that the other parts are. The bigger question still comes back to, obviously, the elephant in the room is the dollar signs, right? So I am so thrilled that we are not going to continue to kick this can down the road and that we are all committed to doing what's right and doing it the right way. And so that, I think, is very exciting. And I do want to see what options we have for our kids.
We absolutely will continue. That's what this discussion was for. Is there any?
Any other comments or questions before we move on, in recognizing that we could talk about this all day. There's so much to it, and I know that this conversation will continue. But Ron, I want to make sure I give you last call to make any thoughts towards this discussion.
I'm not well known for saying no to last call. Yeah, a couple things. The current tenants or users of this structure, do I have this right? Transition, Spirit Robotics, Homeschool, Richmond, Silver Key, and a private basketball club.
70, yeah.
Okay, so I just sent Dr. Dattery a sample matrix that I think might be valuable for us to really understand the nature of the animal that we're attempting to care for here. And it really focuses on some simple things, right? What's the entity? What is the mission of that entity? Why do they exist, and what are we trying to achieve with them? How many hours a week are they in structure? How many students? How many staff? How much square footage are they utilizing, and do they need? And then what's the revenue associated with it, if any? Once we have that, then we can look at how easy or hard it is to find an alternative location versus maintain what we have. And at least then we can understand a little bit about the quantity and quality of disruption that this may or may not cause. As a team concur, that would be a valuable thing to understand.
You're getting nods, Ron.
Are the nods going up and down or left or right?
They're going up and down in affirmation.
To left.
Well, that's a lot better than I get at home. Let's do it then.
Good idea. Anything else?
Yeah, and I apologize just based on the audio maybe not being there for Melissa. What were the results of the soils test in that area?
So we haven't done the soils test. I don't know if Tri-Lakes Cares has done that. I know that was something they had asked about.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with her particular audio. Can someone just please paraphrase that for me?
Yes, the answer is we do not have a soils test that we are familiar with yet or right now. Tri-Lakes Cares was looking into a soils test, but we don't know if they have and what those results are if they have.
Okay, so I guess it's a question then for Melissa. Is it prudent for us to do one given the history of that real estate?
Deep contemplation, Ron.
Excuse me, it could be a component of a decision, and especially would affect if on the demo only, what is the remaining work beyond the building abatement that might be necessary. Each option would have its own kind of soils impact, I suppose. I guess maybe is what I'm thinking of with it. So that's why there is no specific single soils test.
Military facility at some juncture.
He said, was that a military facility at some juncture? He's talking about the history of the World War, the bunker piece of it. But I thought that was donated to us from the Air Force Academy.
So at this point in time, I've heard rumors of that. I have not found any historical documentation, and I have gone back to like 1930s and 1920s topo maps to see any soil disruption, and I cannot find anything at this point in time. Doesn't mean it wasn't, I just haven't found it.
Okay. Melissa said she hasn't found any soil disruption at this time.
Okay. Well, then we'll leave it to the professionals. I just want to leave that stone unturned in case there was some potential risk. That's all.
Okay, one. And then last call, Todd stepped out for a second. Last call, Chris? Last call, Patty? Can I put one more request because you don't have enough on your plate?
Sure.
I would like to know when we're looking at options, regardless of the option, what that we decide on, what would it look like if we had our transition students educated in a house? So whether it's some real estate in town close to here, or it's a build from maybe our Lewis Palmer High School students, or a build we do, but something that's more appropriate for transitions education. And also, what options and opportunities are there for homeschool enrichment? Can we pair with the YMCA, for example?
Right, you read my mind. We will
Yep.
absolutely bring that in
Perfect.
the next conversation, a more, complete picture then.
Okay.
Of this discussion.
Excellent. Thank you
Absolutely.
so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, I gave last call. Are you good, sir? All right, Todd's got thumbs up. So thank you so much. I know that a lot of work went into this and it's not done yet, but I think that I'm thrilled with the trajectory of where we are with this. It's good. Okay, B3, our UIP discussion, and I do apologize to our team. I know it's 10:55. Is everybody okay to stay till 11:30?
I have a hard stop at the hour.
Anybody else? Amber, are you good until 11:30?
I'm
Dr.
fine.
Brahm, are you good till then? I believe so. Okay, or just jump in and go until we can go.
So our intent this morning was to give you a preview of the Unified Improvement Planning process so that you feel well prepared to vote on approving these plans at the upcoming regular meeting. So we'll just give you a high-level overview, and in the board's executive view, I've included draft plans for the district level Unified Improvement Plan as well as each school's draft. Dr. Dattery and I are in the process of providing each school feedback, and each school is also still in the process of getting final feedback from their building accountability committees. So these are not the exact plans that you'll vote on, but they are very close and they're being polished between now and the regular meeting. A quick overview, and let's see. There we go. So because some of you have only participated in this process once last school year, districts and schools all are required to submit a Unified Improvement Plan to the Department of Education at least every 2 years, and this is based on their performance. So last year we did have 3 schools submit plans based on participation and performance. This year, all of our schools qualify as performance level plans, which is the highest level of performance that a school can be rated. And so if we continue with the excellent performance that we're currently experiencing, these plans may extend for 2 full years until we submit a plan again 2 years from now, again, depending on how our schools perform next school year. Each year, the Board of Education is required to approve these plans, and then we submit them to the Department of Education for public viewing. So as we develop these plans, we identify specific performance priorities, and that's based on the school and district performance frameworks that we talked about at our last meeting. They also are intended to address specific state and federal requirements. So you see some of those, such as the READ Act here, and we do have a policy reference related to accreditation. Okay, so I'm not going to spend time on this, but we can go back to this as a reference. Again, these reports are what we are to base our improvement planning upon. So we can, and I can just click through those if you want, Michael. Okay, so we're primarily addressing priority 2, academic excellence, although in our school plans you will also see some references to priority 1, creating a safe, healthy, and welcoming school environment. As part of the process, we involve many stakeholders, including the board in our discussions, but also our parent and community advisory committee. We've included our entire district leadership team, which includes principals and many experts, such as Dr. Braun here and others in special education and gifted education. And then each building gets input from their school leadership teams and their building accountability committees. Okay, at the district level, these are the priorities that we identified based on our current district performance. We are focusing on these were the areas that needed the most attention. So students are not making adequate growth in math at the elementary level. We're actually just half a point away from scoring at meets at the elementary level. And then at the middle school level, we're really paying close attention to growth in both English language arts and math. Our district level performance in this area includes Lewis Palmer Middle School, 7th and 8th grade, and also Monument Academy, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So we're doing our best to support them in their improvement as well. The goals that you'll see within the district plan are to achieve and maintain at least a median growth percentile of 50 in English language arts and math at all levels. So essentially, we want our students to be growing at an appropriate expected level compared to their like scoring peers. And we've also set a goal to increase the percentage of students reading at benchmark by the end of 3rd grade to 90% in the next 3 years. Currently, we have 27% of 3rd graders who are below that benchmark, which is not a grade level necessarily, but it's an indicator of their future success. We'll have a very thorough report on our literacy results at the upcoming board meeting as well, so we can go more into that at that time. Our team did a thorough root cause analysis. Here were some of the ideas they had that may be contributing to our current performance. And these would be our current performance priorities, the areas we want to improve. One of the areas we talked about at a recent board meeting was the potential that hiring less experienced staff may be contributing to trends in lower overall performance on our district performance framework. And so we did a little digging into that. And here's what we found. So if we go back several years to the 2017-2018 school year, our average year's teacher experience was 12.56 years. To recently last year, just over 10 years experience. So we are seeing a decline in our teacher experience. And you can see those points there from 79 to 74.5 were the total out of 100 points that we could earn as a district on our framework. I've provided a high-level overview of some of the action steps that we've identified as a team and with input from the Parent and Community Advisory Committee. These are very much more detailed within the documents in your executive view. So in English language arts, we're really focusing on providing additional professional development for teachers, aligning our instruction from preschool all the way up through the levels and focusing on the individual needs of students with IEPs who are benefiting from special education, as well as our multilingual learners. We are right in the process now of conducting a review of our current elementary literacy resources, as well as our math resources at the elementary level. And developing more consistent practices for monitoring the progress and growth of our elementary students. In math, You'll see some very similar action steps that our team has identified, really focusing on increasing professional development in math because we have been hyper-focused on literacy the last several years. We want to be paying as much attention to math as we are to literacy instruction. As I mentioned, we're also conducting a review of our current resources, and we are working with our principals to identify bright spots because we do have some excellent growth in the area of math, and we want to learn from what those teachers who are experiencing exceptional growth of students are doing so that we can replicate those practices across the district. In the slides, you'll see some highlights of what each school includes in their plan, and each of these plans, again, is in board docs for your review. So I'll let you click through those.
You can really see the alignment with the school UIP as to the district in terms of ELA and math, growth primarily, as well as achievement.
Okay, so our next steps, again, we're going to be continuing to refine these plans prior to the October 21st board meeting. And then upon your vote, we will submit these plans to the Department of Education for public viewing. What questions can we answer for you?
Quick question. When I mentioned earlier that our board of directors for CASB, we met last weekend and we had a presentation from Angelica from the Colorado State Board of Education, and she went over the state test scores as well. And she noted that there was now an increase of districts with distinction. There's now 17 schools, so there are some schools that are growing. But she also noted that math scores took a dip as a trend across the state of Colorado. Some districts saw some great growth, some did not see as much growth, but she pointed out, she didn't mention districts like us, she pointed to me and said, you guys are a district of distinction, for example. She noted that school districts that are on improvement plans or turnaround plans saw stronger growth because there's more room to grow versus school districts that are typically at the top in their achievement. There's less data points to grow. Does that resonate?
They're growing in their achievement scores is my assumption,
Okay.
how you're describing it, because growth, when we talk about a student growing, they're compared to students who typically score similar to them. So I'm assuming that when she's talking about making gains, she's talking about schools who are lower performing are seeing bigger increases in their performance, in their achievement performance.
Gotcha.
Concur?
I would.
Okay. There was a big, robust debate about it of different school districts. Some surprised me of their stance on this being our measurement of success based on the growth scores versus the achievement scores. I would love to just share it like a PCAC or something because it was very, I learned a lot from it. So just want to put that out there and ask that question.
So to your point, and I'm going back to one of the previous slides that we discussed as a team here, our math achievement is already very, very high. We do want to focus on growing our students a bit more than what we currently are, but we are typically hovering around the 85th percentile or above in how our students achieve comparatively.
Gotcha. And she also spoke to what you guys have spoken to about the change in the manner in which the SAT and pre-SAT is administered now has had an effect, which you already talked about that. Questions or discussion team for our other team? No? This is a lot. So PCAC also has to vote on these UIPs at our next meeting as well, right?
We have done a process where they've given input.
Okay.
That's not something that we have done that I'm aware of, but we do get input from our Parent and Community Advisory Committee, which helped shape the actions that are within this plan. And then we do that same process with each of our school accountability committees.
Awesome.
And this will come back to you at the next board business meeting for approval.
At our October
At our October
regular meeting.
Regular meeting, correct.
Yeah. So do your homework, gang, and be prepared to vote and ask questions before we vote to accept the recommendations. I also liked the way the recommendations were indeed uniform between our schools and Monument Academy's UIP plan is very similar to ours as well. So it is very aligned. So excellent. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Before.
Before, okay.
Yep.
Not before.
Bingo.
Before. Do you want me just to take
Yes,
this and run?
please.
Okay, excellent. So this last item to you today for on our work session is really around policy and looking at bringing forward any policies over the course of the year, and it would extend into next academic school year as well, around all of our policies. As we've talked a little bit about this at our retreat. Ms. Upchurch and I have discussed as well, just to do a thorough policy review, make sure that all of our policies are in alignment. There have been a few that we've just reviewed and noticed just some little things here and there. And while some have been very, very likely reviewed, they don't have a review date. Many of them, the last time they were looks like on paper reviewed and revised was in 2016. While I say that, I want to say that with caution, that I believe many of them were reviewed. They just did put a review date. And so we are going to go through all of those, however, and make sure that we are in full alignment with that process. And so what you see in terms of policy BG is really just the policy that outlines board, how we go about that, where if there's any new policies, it is a two-read. The first read is presented for a first reading and discussion. The second read is then discussion and formal approval. That is how we also go through any revision of these policies, and if there are any that we need to repeal, if they are no longer needed. So we have then the second document, that's just very quickly the policy BG, but yeah, more importantly, just for review, is this document, which is our timeline, and we do say projected timeline, because as we go through it, our team has taken a look at this, and as a cabinet team has decided, all right, let's start with G policies, because in fact, last spring, Ms. Welch brought several G policies forward for review, so we've kind of started in a chunk of those. And so she is continuing that process, and we will bring those forward. If we are able, we will bring them forward in the next business meeting and get a little bit of a jump, but at the very latest, we will bring them to you in November. And we have a November, December, because that first read of any changes, any revisions, or repeals that need to be made out of G policies, that first read would happen in November. And then the second read on the November 18th, and then the second read and for your approval, for your action, I should say, then would be on the December 16th meeting. So we'll take 2 business meetings, as you know, to go through all of these. So it's a bit of an aggressive timeline on one hand, and on the other hand, until we get into them, we will not bring to you those that we've reviewed that need no changes. So if we start to see that, okay, there's more in here that we need to make more revisions to or more repeals, and then we will adjust our timeline, and I'll be very open with all of you about any of those adjustments if we need to make them. But we will kind of march through. You'll see all of these that we will go through. Section C and F are quite small sections. C is a general school administration, and F is facility planning and development. And so I will review those and bring those kind of into a board meeting, maybe in one of the months that has very few. So we'll kind of pull those in as appropriate. And again, if there are any that actually have revisions or need to be repealed. Don't believe there are any new policies that we would be bringing forward to you that are not already on the books. I don't anticipate that in any way. It would just merely be revisions or repeals. And if not, I will just say, just to really make sure that we are clear, every policy will have a date on it, either 2024, 2025, whatever the year may be, as at minimum being reviewed, and that it is in alignment with what it needs to be. Does that sound good?
What I've appreciated is our policy review process. I was just recently asked by a parent on when we do our policy reviews that our policies be made public. And just to reiterate, obviously, all of our policies, when we're updated, and we just updated some this summer, and we looked at some in the spring, we continue, that it's very public. And I do appreciate that when we can, that your team and you guys are giving us a heads up at our work session to say, hey, just FYI, at our next regular board meeting, you're going to be seeing a red line first read. And to the board, when we see those red line first reads, that is our opportunity to say, hey, I don't understand this red line, why'd we do that? Or can we reword that? Does it have to be may, shall, might, can, should, would, those kinds of things. And then if there's if we still need to redline it at the second reading, we do have that availability to kick it out to a third reading, do that again. Ideally, we wanted to address that in the first read, but that also gives the community and our stakeholders an opportunity to come to the board meeting and engage with the board and talk to us about our policy changes or upgrades or whatnot. So it is a very public process that is done with our policies, and our policies are very public. So, and that's for transparency purposes. So, I mean, I know I'm preaching the choir, but I do have one question. On in May for board governance and operations, is there a rhyme or reason to May? And here's why I ask. We have CASB's winter conference, legislative conference, and we have CASB's fall, not just the fall delegate assembly, but the convention that occurs. And sometimes we glean some new and interesting information that helps us in the process when it comes to specifically board governance.
Okay.
And I was looking at policy BAA, and I'm just going to throw that out there as an example. And I'll tell you what it is. It's the electronic participation in school boards meetings. And I want to make sure that we are in compliance, and this one was one that we changed and voted because the state law changed and allowed us to do this. Before, it was very strict on how many times we could participate electronically. The state, due to COVID, opened it up, which makes sense because we're in a new world and technology allows us to chime in. But our policy is pretty strict, and it might be too strict for us. It says 2 electronic meetings a year, period, unless the board approves. And that's for regular and special meetings. Well, what about work sessions, for example? So that's just a low-hanging fruit example of one that we should probably look at and investigate and update to be a little more fair and accommodating to the world we live in today. So I was wondering, can we move that one up to maybe December? Or what's on December?
Yeah, we could absolutely. Are you suggesting, just to be clear, are you thinking all B policies moved up to December? Or
yeah,
just,
can we
okay.
switch B policies for even January, maybe after the start of the school year? Or is there a reason that we need to, I want to make sure that we're not interrupting the cadence that you have set forth.
There were a few that we had put in there very specifically, thinking around Mr. Ridgway's, the different priorities that he has. And so February, March was a good time, so I don't want to move fiscal management for that reason. I policies, G policies and I policies, we've done a fair amount with. So we just were thinking of starting there, but we can most certainly move up B to the December and January timeframe and move I down a little bit if we needed to. We could do that. Or move J policies.
J, yeah, let's, maybe J.
Do we move J policies? We
Yeah.
could switch that. And we could do that as well. I might move a few of those down and put J policies in March and April.
Okay.
How about
That's
if I
just my,
do that?
that's my own request,
Let's do
if
that.
the board agrees. Okay.
Okay.
I just want to
so-
make sure we're taking care of our board members too.
So what I'm going to do is move B policies up to the January, February. I'm going to move J policies to March, April, and I'm going to move K policies to May, June. Okay, all right. Excellent. Thank you for that suggestion.
Thank you.
And thank you for your support. This will be a bit of a lift for the team, but we think we've got a good process in place to do it, so
Because you don't have enough on your plates already. We,
we're good.
we also want to have your work that you're doing, and you're doing good things, and making sure that we're not sending somebody into a tailspin that's like, okay, now what? Where's my priority now? And that's obviously on for you, but,
Thank you.
and I appreciate that you do that, but.
We will do that, and
But-
if we need to make adjustments. Thank you for that, because we may as we get into this.
Okay.
But we think this is an appropriate timeline to at least present to you today.
Excellent. Okay. Anything else? No? Well, I just want to finalize and say thank you all. It was a pleasure to visit Palmer Ridge High School this morning, their staff and their school, and see the students in action. We have visited all the staff meetings as well, and as you all have seen, there's opportunity for us to shadow our educators in their classrooms. They've extended that invitation, so please take advantage of that. But it was a delight, and thank you for setting those up, Dr. Dattery, because I think it really does help to have that communication piece and that relationship building with our buildings and our staff. And I'll see everybody at Empty Bowls this Thursday. So, and I'll also be at Kilmer at the same time at their literacy night. So figure out how.
Both and.
Yep. So, anything else for the good of the order before you guys kick out? No? Well, thank you all so much. Thanks. All right, we're adjourned. 11:21. We're 20 minutes behind, but that's okay. Thanks, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Whenever you do that with your lip, I'm always like, what do you think?
Might be a nervous tick.
Oh, I thought you had something you wanted to say.
No, well, I did, but
Program applications. Because I feel like they're in like, right now, schools doing a trace application instead of